Hey, friends, welcome back. So, I have with us today an incredible guest that I am personally excited to meet. I wanted to ask you and for you to consider in competitive markets and spaces where independent artists and entrepreneurs sometimes struggle with gaining visibility and positioning, what sets apart those who are successful at transforming their passion into a powerful movement? Well, meet Kacie, a visionary arts advocate and podcast creator who's changing the game for local creatives. Kacie is sharing stories, giving a platform to the voices that deserve to be heard. Her journey from Hampton University to founding Could Be Pretty Cool is like an award winning recipe in creativity and leading with intention. Welcome to Impact Innovators with Felicia Ford, where we dive into the strategies that empower changemaker brands to leave a lasting legacy. Think of this podcast as your audio playbook for meaningful action. What's possible when thought leaders, disruptors, and pioneers align to share their journeys? I'm Felicia Ford, your host, bringing together the brightest minds and the most groundbreaking ideas to help you drive change, navigate through the sticky stuff, and elevate your brand. Whether you're tackling funding hurdles, looking for growth strategies, or seeking the perfect balance between profit and purpose, we've got you covered. Stay tuned and be a part of a movement that's setting new benchmarks in how we think about progress, community, and doing. Let's innovate, impact, and inspire. I wanted to read her bio because I loved it. Kacie's work has helped artists navigating a saturated industry, creating a space where talent can not only thrive, but be truly celebrated. Yeah. Kacie's a creator and arts advocate based out of Atlanta, Georgia. She earned her BS in music recording technology from Hampton University and her MFA in sound design from Savannah College of Art and Design. As a creative, this is exciting language, okay? After participating in the 2019 Spotify Sound Up Accelerator program, she formed the production company Could Be Pretty Cool, whose mission is to produce unique creative experiences to inspire community building through the arts. She is the creator and host of the Spotify original podcast, You Heard Me Right, and has been named one of the 40 under 40 in podcasting by Podcast Magazine. Kacie's also served as a theatrical sound designer, arts administrator, and speaker for local and national arts and cultural organizations. Kacie.
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast today.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm so excited to meet you and to have you here and for everyone else to hear. My community, my friends, those people who may not leave a review on Apple Podcasts, but will send me an email are going to be so excited to hear from you.
Amazing.
You've got a fan club you didn't even know you had.
Dear.
So she's like, oh no. But no, Kacie, share with me what brought this about, but share with us how the journey began and how you got here.
Absolutely. So, yes, I am the super baby of four siblings. I was a later in life surprise. And my guess is that by that point, my parents were so tired. They were just like, go do whatever you want, youngest child. And so I was always encouraged to do music and art. And there was never any sign that there wasn't a possibility for a career at some point,
Mhm.
working in the arts. And so that's what I did through high school. I was in jazz band and orchestra, and I
Mm.
did theater. And any chance that I got to shadow someone who was working in a local film shoot, or even like in church, just standing next to the guy doing like the soundboard.
Sound, yeah.
Yes, I just was like, oh, I love all this stuff. I don't know what it means, but I just want to do it.
Mhm.
And so, yes, I attended Hampton University, and that's when I actually was more exposed to working in theater, doing theater audio, ended up tacking on a theater minor. And everything was great until I graduated in the midst of the Great Recession with a
Oh,
music degree and a
what?
theater minor. And so that's really when I started having my first kind of like, oh, this
Mhm.
is this is this is a skill set that I'm going to really have to figure out how to survive
Mhm.
using.
Mhm.
And so it's been a journey. The reason that could be pretty cool started, and the reason that our focus is on helping to empower and tell stories about indie creators is because as an indie creator and indie artist, I definitely went through the starving artist phase, the
Right.
living with the roommates, the living, on a mattress on the floor, trying to
Yeah.
figure out, can I break this ramen brick in half and eat half for lunch and half for dinner?
Yeah.
And, I'm grateful for having those kind of really humbling times,
Mhm.
but it's not necessary. And I want to hopefully be an advocate for indie creators, indie creative entrepreneurs, so that they don't have to go through that phase as
Right.
well. And
Right.
so that's what could be pretty cool to celebrate. So we make content to help empower creative entrepreneurs and indie artists.
I love that. I'm a creative, but I'm more so on the operations and business side. So this platform has come about for change makers. And I see you as certainly a change maker because you're changing the narrative about how people perceive the arts. But when you were recognized as one of the top 40 under 40 in podcasting, how did that shift your work and what you're doing and your platform?
Sure. So yes, that was such a surprise, namely because, I think a lot of people, when they think of podcasters, they think of folks with, these huge audiences all over the world, everyone's tuning in. And the work that we do, I would consider to be very niche. It's very, again, indie artist focused. And so that's primarily who our audience is.
Mhm.
And I'm happy for that. I think having an engaged, smaller niche audience is almost key for folks like me,
Mhm.
because that's directly who I'm speaking to.
Mhm.
But I was really almost like touched to be recognized by this national platform, mainly because I was like, oh, how did you even hear about us? Like, how did you even find out that like we exist? And, for me, it just goes to show if you are, as you mentioned in your intro, intentional about the message that you're trying to put out, if you're intentional about who you're speaking to, inadvertently, folks are going to recognize that and say, like,
Mhm.
oh, yes, this may not be for everyone, but
Mhm.
they're really pure in how they're trying to do what it is they're trying to do. So
Right.
it was a really it was like a really humbling moment.
Yeah.
And it was also humbling because this happened in 2022, which was kind of like the peak of what our company was becoming and
Mhm.
the work that we were making. And it was also almost the beginning of, I would say, a major shift in the way that the podcasting industry started to, I would say, course correct
Mm.
after the COVID pandemic. So it was
Mhm.
like a boost into figuring out what the hell we were gonna do next.
Yeah. No, you just introduced something though that I had not yet considered to talk about today in our conversation. But share with us what that was like though for you, Casey, the before, the after, that whole arc, right? And how it shifted your vision and your movement and what you're doing.
Absolutely. So I would say our operations as a production company really started during 2020, during the pandemic.
Mhm.
I was working full time at, prior to the kind of the onset of the pandemic,
Mhm.
and was laid off from my full time gig, sitting in the house. What am I about to do now?
Yeah.
And that just happened to be a time when everyone started podcasts. That's kind of one of the avenues, as you mentioned, people turn to
Yeah.
both find a creative outlet. People were listening to podcasts more. And because I had participated in the Spotify Sound Up boot camp the year prior, I reached back to some folks who were a part of the program and was like, "Hey, I made like this pilot episode of the show, sitting in the house. Can you
Yeah.
just give me some feedback on it?" And through a series of crazy events, we ended up licensing the show to them for 2 years. You heard me
Wow.
right. And so figuring out how to produce a podcast that involved group people on an episode during a
Mhm.
pandemic was
Mhm.
a whole thing. Figuring out how to build a team and work with the team and produce during that time was a whole thing. But it kind of kept kept I would say kept me sane because it's like
Yeah.
something else to focus on.
Yeah.
This wasn't just the pandemic time, it was, of course, the racial reckoning, it was the
Mm.
presidential election, it was just
Mhm.
like, so being able to focus on something like that with, like, such a major brand was just really an incredible thing. And then in 2020, as that sort of slope started coming to the other side, I'll admit there was a little bit of, like, I don't know, is it like professional depression? Is that like a thing where it's just kinda like, "Oh,
Yeah.
so that's it now. I
Yeah.
built this company on this primarily this one product.
Right.
How do we continue to be a company?"
Yeah.
And I would say the pivot, I mean, in some ways, it's still ongoing. The
Mhm.
pivot was long, but
Mhm.
we ended up landing in 2023 in the nonprofit and education space. And that's sort of where we have been leaning into ever since.
Oh, that incredible story. Maybe we talk about this professional depression because I think that's something that isn't widely spoken about in the creative world. We have writer's block or we have days when it's just not coming and we don't call it creative block. We're going through a phase, right? But that remote work, that's the very simplified term, right? How do you drive your business? How do you drive yourself because you're the owner and the product in a sense? And then how do you drive your team? But you have this diverse perspective and this diverse message that you're sharing on your podcast. What do you look for in your guests and what do you look for in your team? What does that look like for you?
Yes, amazing question. My team consists largely of either folks that I've known for years, who is like, as soon as I got the opportunity to throw them a few coins, like, y'all come, I know your work. I've known everything that you've done. Like, we
Yeah.
can finally do it together. So in the beginning stages, like the 2020 2022 phase, that's largely who it was. Now I'm very happy to share my team consists of some younger, I have two amazing associates who are recent grads, like 23, 25 ish.
Yeah.
These Gen Z kids are different.
Yes.
They are so smart.
Mhm.
They are so just confident and they figure things out. And I, I'm really like, I think I'm at the point where I can say the young people. I'm really like, as I'm trying to, as a business owner, figure out like life and what I'm doing,
Mhm.
having this sort of energy of like younger creators who are like hungry and they love sharing ideas. They love asking for feedback. It makes it easier to try to figure out how to keep getting work and keep
Mm.
being able to pay them
Yeah.
because it really is a collaborative effort, and I feel like they make me better,
Mhm.
and I really appreciate everything they do. So shout out, Trinity and Liz, y'all are great.
Yay. Trinity and Liz. So telling these stories, when you said that leaning into the education and the nonprofit space, my eyes lit up again. What do you look for in your guests?
Yes, great question. So, our guests range from folks who work in academic spaces. So, maybe they teach arts business class or they study the creator economy, to folks working in government.
Mhm.
Actually, we just had a recent interview. I'm very excited with the executive director of policy and programs at the New York City Mayor's Office of
Ooh.
Media and Entertainment. And so being able to speak with folks like that who are at a policy level
Mhm.
trying to help artists and creatives in like one of the biggest cities in the world is like, whoa, that's crazy. And then we also try to prioritize finding smaller indie creators who may not, as you said, have huge followings yet.
Mhm.
Maybe they aren't focused on their social presence, but they have a brick and mortar print shop,
Right.
or they perform in, the back of coffee shops, but they're performing regularly and able to
Right.
pay their rent.
Right.
And
Right.
so really just showing the diversity of the type of folks who make up this space.
Mhm.
Both people who they do this, creative work full time, and this is all they do, to people who are like, oh yeah, I play in a wedding cover band, and we do like 2 shows a year. That's my creative outlet, but we get paid. That's fine too. You're also
Right.
an artist and a creator. And so just kind of showing the diversity of what an indie artist could look like is
Uh,
what we prioritize.
that, if we stop the interview right now, I'd be happy with how you just ended that. That's an incredible statement. It's moving because in the, I would say maybe before 2000s, podcasts were really corporate-ish. They were really sterile. They were really businessy. There weren't as many creatives who were sharing what this life is like and sharing that it can be a life and a lifestyle. It doesn't have to be a side hustle, but building these meaningful connections and creating this storytelling arc that you're helping to highlight some incredible people. Do you have a favorite that you that you've, spoken with?
This is always the hardest question. Um, I okay, definitely not because everyone's my favorite.
Yeah,
Everyone's amazing. But
yeah.
I guess some folks who have stuck out to me this season on
Mm,
our podcast could be pretty cool news. There is a young woman who works as a nurse, but also takes her nursing skills and cosmetology skills and performs at home services for folks in the LGBT community. So maybe someone is new to makeup in the LGBT community, but also wants to get a COVID test or an
right,
STD test. They
right.
go and provide sort of holistic beauty and health services in the
Wow.
comfort of someone's home. That to me was like the power of using your creative skill set and doing something to like really help folks and help a
Yeah.
community. That really stuck out to me. And I would say, let's see, another guest that stuck out this season. She okay, of course her name's escaping me, but she's the executive director of the, I hope I get this right, Strategic National Arts Alumni Project. And
Mm,
basically what they set out to do is to find data about art school graduates like myself
mhm.
to hopefully, understand how we graduates can again go out into the world and not become starving artists.
Right.
To, see what opportunities aren't being met, to see
Yeah.
what skill gaps there are. And so that was just another really fascinating kind of on the more academic side of like, yes, there are so many opportunities in these creative industries, either
Oh,
from a academic side, a policy side, an advocacy side, or to actually be a creator. And it's just good to know there's so many folks working to help make lives better for indie artists.
oh, it's amazing, and I might overuse the term storytelling and narrative and sound and platform, but those are actual things that are necessary, and they're so real to us in the creator community. And I hear you talking about policy, my eyes lit up again, for a different reason, for working in educational policy, but it's people like you and the guests that you bring to the forefront that actually drive that, because otherwise, how else would people in policy know that there's a problem or that there's a solution to a problem that they've been looking for? How do you stay ahead, Casey? What's your way of staying ahead of the game? I heard you say you have a great team, but
No, that's such a great question. I e what is the phrase? It's data plus advocacy equals equity. I
mm,
didn't make that up. Someone else said it. And so for me, data is the storytelling piece for independent artists and creators. Data is going and talking to, the small theater company who hasn't been getting funding from the city or from, major funders to ask, like, how is this affecting how you're able to operate? What
Mm,
would you do if you were able to have this funding that, you desperately need? Being able to tell that story and then hopefully be in a room with, a policymaker, a grant maker, and say, while you're funding the legacy arts organizations who we love, the ballets and the operas and the all that, that's very important.
right,
But there are so many smaller organizations who, you should just come check out something that they're doing. Maybe there's
right.
some synergy there because they could really use support um, to to really be hopefully an advocate and a bridge between those indie folks and people who can actually make decisions
Yeah.
is what I try to do. I try to go to as many events as possible, although in some I have to stop that because sleep and relaxing also important as an independent business owner. But yeah, I just try to s- not necessarily find things off the grid, but not necessarily always the most obvious choices for arts events or
Mhm.
cultural events in the city. Just trying to figure out who are the folks who are driving culture forward,
Yeah.
who aren't necessarily getting that recognition.
Yeah.
That's who I try to find. And again, that's who I try to bring to the attention of stakeholders who can hopefully support them at some point.
You're doing such great work. I'm sure those that you are highlighting are extremely grateful. But then I'm also going to speak from the donor perspective. But because you just brought this up, I think it's so important and something that I even like to share with my donor peers or other philanthropists. You're what I would consider the plug. You have your ear to the ground. You see. Not only do you see, but you're passionate about what you're seeing. You're passionate about what you're sharing. And your sole purpose of sharing the message so that there's a solution or a connection somewhere, I think it helps you stand out as what you do and in the purpose of what you do. With that in mind, if there was something that you could change about the podcasting industry and how stories are told, what might that look like?
Wow. So this is coming from someone who my entryway into podcasting, I know is a very not common way for most indie folks, right? For the first thing you pitch to be picked up by like a major network, not the way that it happens. And now being on the other side of like, oh man, I hope I have, a few hours and a few dollars to scrap this episode together so that I can release it when I said I would. Um, I would love for there to be a podcast middle class of
Mm.
an ecosystem that isn't just for major shows that are on the big networks, the Spotify's and the Audibles and the we love those,
Yeah,
or just the folks who are like scrapping trying to get it done. Like,
yeah,
how can we build an ecosystem where folks who are consistent, folks who are putting out a good product also have access to resources, whether that's networking, whether that's sponsorship, whether that's capital. For so many folks in most digital creator spaces, your ticket into those rooms are number of followers, number of downloads, number of et cetera.
right,
And for folks who have amazing products who are still building those numbers, they're not getting in the room. So, like,
right,
how can we reimagine what a successful podcast looks
right,
like besides, oh, you have a million downloads?
right.
So, yeah, I would love for there just to be more opportunities for folks who are up and coming
Mhm.
to have access to the relationship building that they need.
Insightful, simple, makes perfect sense. And I feel like it would take those like you who are shaping what podcasting looks like and what it can be to drive that change. And I applaud you for what you're doing for other podcasters, what you're doing for indie artists, what you're doing for educators and change makers as you're doing all the things and leading your team and learning the things. What do you do to balance between preserving your artistic integrity while meeting the needs of the business?
In truth, becoming an entrepreneur, a business owner was never something that I thought I was going to ever do. It was a happy accident.
Mhm,
And yes, learning about taxes and getting business licenses and filing this thing, filing that thing was definitely a journey, a
mhm.
continuous journey.
Yeah.
And I'm happy that I kinda know this skill set now. I have other creator friends who are like, "Oh, I'm thinking about starting a LLC," or like, "What do I need to get a business bank account?" To be
Mm,
able to help other folks is great, but I think that, in truth, sometimes that type of work, that sort of administrative hat that one has to wear
mhm.
can, on occasion, overpower the creative piece, right?
Yeah.
You can't just frolic in the field all day, which I enjoyed. But again, when I was frolicking, I was also like super broke. So the
Right,
balance, I would
right.
say, it's almost I wouldn't say that the balance happens at the same time. There
Mhm,
are very few days where I feel equally as creatively satisfied as I do like, "Oh, we have, like, the books in order or the scheduling
mhm,
and the calendars are straight." But
mhm.
it, like, comes in waves with each. Um, that's the reality right now.
I can totally respect that and relate significantly. But I'd love to know what's next for you and could be pretty cool. What's anything exciting coming up? Any projects or initiatives that you're excited about?
Well, yes. So as I mentioned, I came from a theater world doing sound for theater, and something that we actually just found out about next year, we'll be presenting at the Southeastern Theater Conference
Mhm,
about using podcasts as part of marketing initiatives for theater. So it's kind of like combining my arts admin background, my
oh,
design, my theater, my podcasting. And so finding more ways to, I don't know, get more like interdisciplinary with
yeah.
my knowledge set and hopefully turn those into new products and services for the business is something that I'm really looking forward to next year.
Mm.
We are also, of course, AI, that's the big buzz. But we're looking into actually building our first digital platform to hopefully connect creators and artists to opportunities using AI. And that is another completely out of the blue, no tech background thing that I'm working on. But if it hopefully continues to propel the message of, giving indie artists and creators opportunities to have sustainable careers, I'm willing to undertake it and put in the work. And so, yes, hopefully by end of 2025, our first beta will be available.
Wow, that's super incredible. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, super exciting. Casey, what do you hope your legacy will be in the world of arts and podcasting? What mark do you want to leave and impress upon the communities you're serving?
Wow. I Oh dear, my legacy. If nothing else, like right now, if you wanted to read a book about arts administration or museum administration, like you could go and find a textbook on that.
Mhm,
The textbooks about being arts entrepreneur or succeeding in the creator economy or whatever, words we're using, those are just starting to be written. Like this
mhm,
field as an academic source of information.
Mhm.
The data about what the creator economy actually is and actually looks like is it's sort of the wild wild west right now. And
Yeah.
yeah, folks are really just starting to like study the creator economy as a serious field of study.
Mm,
And so if nothing else, I would love to be a part of that literature. I would love to be a part of contributing to the academic study of the creator economy, because I do believe that it gives folks from underserved communities, especially, opportunities to go around gatekeepers and not wait for someone else to say you can make your podcast, you can make your web series, you can launch your blog. I think that it can potentially provide so many opportunities for so many people, and I want to help find and just illuminate the pathways for anyone to be able to do that.
mm. Casey, I'm so excited about what you're doing and how you are just leaving an imprint on the world. I mean, folks, you've heard it here. I don't know anyone right now who has a PhD in the arts. I'm going to say the arts, but it just sounds like what you've shared is what someone's dissertation can be in studying and producing the data and the research on this economy. And I just thank you for your work and all that you're doing with your company and your podcast. And I'd love for you to have some last words for our audience today.
Sure. Well, and thank you, Felicia. I think that you providing space for so many different types of entrepreneurs is also vitally important. Another thing that I'm very passionate about is showing that working as an artist or a creative doesn't just have to mean, painting or having a podcast. Working in science as a creator, working in technology, working in, as I mentioned earlier, the healthcare field, and bringing creativity to what you do in your 9 to 5 is, equally as interesting to me. And so the fact that you are providing a platform for so many different types of folks, I think is definitely a part of building a holistically creative ecosystem. So yeah, congratulations to you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it greatly. I cannot wait for you all to continue to read and see more about Casey. Don't forget to check out her article in Strategic Edge Power Moves for Businesses and Nonprofits. We will see you all next time. Hey, Changemaker, real quick before you go, if today's episode helped you in some way, the best way to thank me is to head over to Apple Podcasts, subscribe to the channel, and leave a review. I'd also love to connect with you over on social. You can find me at Friends Call Me Fee. Until next time, keep changing the game.